You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Head on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I am your host, Carl Dumler, and with me as always, I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, how are you doing today, buddy?
Hey, doing pretty well. Just getting excited. I'm going to hit the road tomorrow. Going to drive down to Missouri to cover the Missouri Pro Day. So going to get a look at Drew Lock, Emmanuel Hall, Kendall Blanton, Trey Adams, and a number of other guys. So really excited to do that, and got some family down there as well that I'm going to see. So just excited, and this will be the first vacation day I've taken in a bit. So didn't get to go to the Combine this year. Get to go to a few Pro Days this year. So you win some, you lose some.
There you go. Well, we're also very, very excited today to welcome one of our favorite guys. We're trench warfare kind of guys, and Brandon Thorn, man, I remember finding you early on in Twitter and just following your stuff, and I've learned more about the offensive line from you and some of the others that you're connected with. But we're just really, really happy to have you on the show. And so how about you just take a second, introduce yourself to our listeners, and kind of tell them where they can find you and where they can find all your work.
Hey guys, I really appreciate it. I'm Brandon Thorn. You can follow me at Twitter at Brandon Thorn NFL. I work for the Scouting Academy, USA Football, and host the Trench Warfare podcast, where we talk all things line of scrimmage, offensive, defensive line. And so that's really where I do all my work.
That's great. Yeah, like I said, we're happy to have you on here. And you're a Bronco fan, right?
Yeah, I'm a diehard Broncos fan. I was born in Denver and grew up to love the Broncos. So yeah, that'll be probably for the rest of my life.
Well, good. That's an added bonus of having you on the show and getting to talk Bronco football and trench warfare. Man, you are like our perfect guest, because this is what we love to talk about.
Yeah, this is awesome. I always love coming on podcasts where people appreciate line play. I think that's so cool, and I could talk about it all day. So I love being here.
Being an Iowa Hawkeye fan, I feel like I had no choice.
Yes, man, Iowa's awesome for that.
Yes, they are. Kirk Ferentz, man, he's the dude.
Yeah, seriously, man, he's underrated.
Well, make sure you can find us on Twitter as well. You can find Nick at Nick Kendell MHH, and you can find me at Carl Dumler MHH. You can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod, and make sure you subscribe to our show and leave us a rating, as we value your input on our show. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and the CBS Sports Digital, to find ours and our co-writers' articles and all things pertaining to your Denver Broncos. This podcast is powered by Overtime Media. All right, well, the big news here, Brandon, of course, is the Broncos spending quite a pretty penny to get themselves Jawaan James of Miami. 26-year-old, was a first-round pick, 19th overall in 2014, has kind of struggled with some injuries. But I guess let's just start with, what are your overall thoughts of Jawaan James?
Yeah, so I think Jawaan James is a good right tackle overall. I think when he's on the top of his game, he really is sort of in that top 10 range at his position. I think there was times last year where I thought he was even maybe a little bit higher than that when he's really on and all things are firing on this, at the same time. He's just a little bit up and down to me, especially in pass protection. There's some things, it just seems like he has some mental gaffes sometimes that pop up where, I would just say his mental processing from what I've seen is probably adequate, and I think that's part of it. Part of it also could be some of the injuries that he's dealt with that, we may not know about to the full extent, because it seems like he doesn't move as well from some reps to the other to others. And it's just kind of weird. I don't know how to fully explain it, but it's just a little up and down in pass protection, but he definitely has the ability to be really good there. I think he has the range in pass protection to hit various set points, to cut off wide nine rushers and all an assortment of different alignments there. So I've seen him do it. So I know that he could be very good there. I think he's more in the, average to above average range right now, just because the consistency in the run game. I think he could do a lot. I've heard over the last couple of days of I know there's a quote out there saying that he kind of limited in the run game, but I think the opposite. I think he could do quite a bit there, both gap and zone type of concepts, blocking in space. I saw that pretty good amount last year on film. So, yeah, I think overall, when you look at the landscape of right tackle play in the NFL, you're getting a guy with top 10 ability who could be a little bit inside of that if all things, are going really well for him. So, yeah, I'm a fan, and I think I've liked him a little bit more than most the last couple of years. So, just from a purely on-field perspective, I'm very happy that the Broncos have him.
Yeah, I can't disagree with anything you said there, and it is important to note that the contract, while he is APY-wise the highest paid right tackle in football now, odds are that'll be reset again next year and the year after that. I mean, that's just the way the league is going, with the cap getting bigger every year, but the structure of the contract is big as well. The Broncos, it's essentially a 2-year deal with 2 option years after that, and the dead cap hit of $6 million after the second year, which is not nothing, but I mean, if he gets injured or totally falls off or doesn't improve at all, they can get out of it. And that last year, only a $3 million dead cap hit. So the Broncos did give themselves some flexibility that if things don't work out, with him given his injury history, his inconsistencies, they protect themselves a little bit. So when the deals are first announced, you hear the big money and the largest of all time. Yeah, a lot of people react to that. It's catchy, but the structure of the deal is key. So I think that's a big thing to note as well. And I do want to touch on something that you said there about the pass blocking. So he does have inconsistencies there from the reaching out from it. And when I've seen him, I feel like he does move pretty well, but I'm curious if you have any speculation on why there is some of that inconsistencies in his pass set, because when I see the flashes on tape, you see a guy who's a smooth mover. He obviously has superb length. I think he had 35-inch arm length at the combine. But what is it in his game that when you see what is causing those inconsistencies? Is it the base? Is it his hips? Is it where he's putting his hands, etc.?
Yeah, I think generally from what I remember over the last couple of years watching him, and in particular last year, I think there's quite a few times when he can open up a little prematurely towards the rusher and kind of invite them inside. He gives a little bit of a soft shoulder that way, so can be a little bit susceptible to inside moves, and his power step with his post foot to get back inside, he can kind of drop that at times, which kind of just makes it more difficult to cut off those inside counters. And I think that really starts, though, with his hips. He could be late with his hands sometimes and try to kind of wrap around guys as opposed to strike them. And I see that even with some guys in the class this year, and generally bigger guys with longer arms. I see a lot of that where they're really just trying to wrap around guys as opposed to accurately strike them with independent hand usage and things like that. So he could definitely get better technically in pass protection. And, I think he's just important context with improving that. I mean, generally the only thing I won't say the only thing, but the best chances of ever improving that are getting under a really, really good coach who can help him understand his own body better, maybe tweak his pass set, tweak his stance a little bit, and just put him in better positions. And, what better guy to do than Mike Munchak. So I'm really encouraged despite those concerns in pass protection.
All right. I totally agree. We'll talk about Mike Munchak here in a second, but I am curious, we're not going to totally break down Jawaan James, but what would you say if you could hang your hat on his best trait, and what would you say is his worst trait currently before Mike Munchak gets his hands on him?
Yeah. So I think best trait is probably run blocking, just in general. Break that down into a position-specific trait. I think in gap schemes, I think that's where he's probably best. Blocking on double teams, creating vertical displacement at the point of attack. I think that he has pretty good mobility in his lower half to be able to play with good pad level at times. Most of the time. So I do like those aspects of his game. His overall athleticism is pretty good. So those are the things that I think of positively when I think of James. And then negatively, I think set points are probably his biggest negative. Reaching his landmark, intersecting the rusher at the proper time. It's generally pass protection based for me.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Now, I do want to talk about the comment that came out from Miami. This was on, I believe, Monday Morning Quarterback, and I'll read the quote here. After the Broncos signed Jawaan James, it said, "Privately, some people close to the Dolphins waited to see who James signed with the same eager anticipation with which you wait to see who sits on the seat with the whoopee cushion. They believed a rude awakening or a rude surprise awaits that GM. Turns out that GM is John Elway. He won't hear the whoopee cushion until later down the road, but the Dolphins are already laughing. You can understand why Elway made the move. Right tackles are hard to find, and playing with a bad one can significantly hinder your scheme. But the belief by some in Miami was that other teams wouldn't know just how much energy was spent each week game planning ways to hide and help James. He's not quick or nimble enough to get out in space in the screen game, and he's prone to breakdowns both physically and mentally in pass protection." Now, what did you make of this quote? I felt like that kind of went in the face of a lot of things that I felt like I saw on tape from James, but especially as far as the athleticism, I saw some pull blocks from him, some space blocks that he looks like an adequately athletic tackle in my eyes. And I guess watching him, I couldn't tell so much how much they helped him, but having Laremy Tunsil on one side, who was amazing last year, I could see why you would give a little bit more help to that right side. But overall, I'm curious about this quote. Do you agree with this assessment, or is this something that comes across as sour grapes from an organization that has a tendency to badmouth players out the door?
So the only thing there that makes sense to me is the mental lapse part. That's kind of what I mentioned earlier, that I could kind of see sometimes from him in pass protection. But the rest of it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And to say that it's going to bite Denver down the road, like you mentioned earlier with the contract, there can very easily not be a down the road if things do start to go, downward. So I don't really see that happening. And then to also factor in, Miami hasn't exactly had great offensive line coaching since Jawaan James has been there. I don't think they've developed anybody. I mean, Laremy Tunsil is, extremely talented. They put him at left guard to start, which was questionable, and then put him at left tackle, which he was okay that first year. And then last year, it seems like he got a lot more comfortable. How much that could be credited to the offensive line coach, I'm not sure, because I'm pretty sure they recently changed after that big fiasco that went down with their past guy. But so I think that is probably the biggest factor in all of this. If you're going to think that Jawaan James is all of a sudden going to go in the tank when he's playing for Mike Munchak, it's hard to envision that. And then if it does happen, Denver has an out after 2 years. So I don't know. I like the move, and I don't pay a lot of attention to that quote.
Well, I've seen some people talking about his work in like the screen games and his ability to get to the spot and be able to make a block. And I'm sitting there going, what? This guy, he does have a lot of athleticism. There were some plays there. I watched a lot of the Chicago game against Miami this past year, and there were plays where they were asking him to pull clear across the entire offensive line, go through a hole, go make a block at the second level. And you can't do that if you're not athletic. You can't get to that spot quick enough to be able to make that kind of play. And so I'm sitting there. I understand maybe he doesn't hit at the right time, those kind of things. Some of those inconsistencies can show up. But even there, they left him one-on-one with Khalil Mack on quite a few plays. You don't do that if you don't trust the guy to be able to hold up at least some. They did offer him help throughout the game, but it just does seem like a very much sour grapes. Hey, you didn't take our deal, because I know that they were trying to re-sign him. They were having contract talks with him. So why would you have contract talks with him if you thought that he was worthless? Yeah,
that offensive line in Miami is kind of a mess anyway now, especially now. Last year I thought they weren't very good, minus the tackles. Their interior, you can, I think, replace all of them. And now you have 4 positions really that I think are pretty easily upgraded. So, yeah, maybe it is a little sour grapes losing your second best offensive lineman. Yeah, it's unfortunate, and I think, I don't know. There's going to be a lot of different things too that he's going to be asked to do in a Mike Munchak system. It's going to be, I would imagine, predominantly gap and inside zone based, but then at the same time, it's probably going to be multiple because the offensive coordinators from the Shanahan tree. So I'm sure that there's going to be outside zone mixed in with Munchak, with what he likes to do. But at the same time, I think Munchak's a good enough coach to where he's going to adapt everything to what suits the skill set of each offensive lineman. And I think James can do both. And I think that it's probably going to be a multiple scheme in Denver. So I think it's a good fit that way too.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to get in a little bit more about Mike Munchak, but first, a quick break.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, and we're back with Brandon Thorn here, and we're going to talk arguably one of the biggest additions of any team had all offseason in the addition of Mike Munchak. And I'm curious, if you had to rank Mike Munchak against some of the better offensive line coaches in the NFL right now, where would he stack up?
Probably put him at 2, behind Dante Scarnecchia, but you can make a strong case that he's at 1 or maybe 3 behind Bill Callahan. I mean, I think those 3 are really like the top 3 right now, and then somebody like Aaron Cromer's up there, but I really look at Munchak as like a 1B to Scarnecchia.
Yeah, for sure. And do you have any insights on Mike Munchak? I know he's been a solid offensive line coach for a while, had kind of a up and down time at Tennessee, but then went to the Steelers, and man, he whipped that offensive line into shape, and blocking for a guy like Le'Veon Bell, who obviously is a talented back, but kind of has an odd run style where you're going to get some tackles behind the line of scrimmage. I've seen some, yards per carry stats where the run game wasn't as good, but the pass blocking of that offensive line was, I think, rated the top unit in all of football this past year.
Yeah. As far as the person, I've just heard that he relates very well to the players and the players love him. Of course, he's a Hall of Fame player himself, so he's able to relate to the players in a unique way that most coaches can't. There's not a lot of Hall of Fame offensive line coaches Hall of Fame offensive line players who are offensive line coaches. So that's a big part of his lure to the players. So yeah, I don't have a ton of insight into specific things with his personality or anything, but I know that he's beloved by his players, and that's pretty much across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And some people will talk about, how he has, at least at the Pittsburgh Steelers, built up guys like Andre Villanueva at the left tackle position. Did I say that correctly?
Alejandro,
there we go. And then right tackle you had Marcus Gilbert, Chris Hubbard, but he did have some pretty high-end talent on the inside. He had one of the Pouncey twins at center, and of course David DeCastro at right guard. So looking at the Broncos offensive line, what are the pieces that we have in place right now that you think he can maybe get a little bit more out of, and what are some areas that you think that maybe the Broncos need to be looking to add some talent, because saying that he had no talent to work with on the Steelers offensive line just isn't intellectually honest.
Yeah, no, I mean, he definitely had talent, like you said, center, right guard, but I mean, Ramon Foster is an undrafted player.
Yeah.
Alejandro Villanueva played receiver at Army. Marcus Gilbert had a lot of talent, but he had a lot of issues as well with weight and consistency and things like that. Unfortunately, he couldn't stay healthy, but the most impressive thing with Munchak is no matter who they put in there, when guys like Pouncey did get hurt, or Foster, I mean, he developed guys like Finney, Hubbard, even last year. The name escapes me right now. Filer, I think his name is, right tackle, came out of nowhere. I mean, every time somebody got hurt and it was the next man up, they were by no means a liability. So that, to me, is the most impressive thing about him, and his ability to develop guys is I think, just absolutely incredible, and we've seen it time and time again with different positions, and he's made guys a lot of money. But for Denver, weak spots on the offensive line, I think you have to look at center and right guard. I mean, those are the spots that they need to look at drafting, I think, for sure. One of those two positions, maybe a guy who can do a little of both would be nice. That way you can go into camp and have 3-4 guys competing for 2 spots. I think that would probably be ideal. But from everything I've heard, Leary's going to be the left guard. Of course, Bowles is going to be there, and the right tackle spots I think the left tackle, left guard, right tackle spots are pretty much set. So I think it's center and right guard. That's really where they need to be looking.
What do you think this signing means, especially for a guy like Garrett Bowles, who a lot of people felt like was kind of overdrafted, more of a reach need, kind of pick for the Broncos and really hasn't fully put it together. He has games where he looks like he's a pretty decent left tackle, and then other games where he's just looks like he's completely lost. What do you think this means for him?
I mean, this is the best thing that could possibly happen to him, but the only thing is he has to take the coaching, which I have heard has been an issue in the past. So it doesn't matter how good the coach is. If you don't want to listen and apply it, who cares? So, but at the same time, I mean, he's going to be exposed to – he's not going to be in a better position the rest of his career as he is right now. So if he's going to become anything consistent and a quality starter, it's going to be now. So – yeah, I mean, the pressure's on him. You know, it's not on Munchak in my mind. I mean, who cares if he doesn't develop him, because his track record of development is very long, and all the pressure in my mind's on Bowles. I mean, so yeah, the ball's in his court. He has an elite coach, and yeah, he's got to get better.
Yeah, this might be Bulls' last chance. I can't see them going left tackle early in this draft, maybe a pure left tackle, but they're going to give Bulls one more shot. And if he doesn't take that step this year and Mike Munchak puts the thumb down, that's probably RIP for Garrett Bowles.
Yeah, I would think so, because it's not going to get better anywhere else. So.
Nope, absolutely. Year 3 as well for a first-round pick, so that's yep. Big. So, yeah. All right, sure. Well, we're going to talk about some draft prospects here before we get out of here, but first, one more quick break.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, and we're back with Brandon Thorn again, and we've talked a little bit about, Mike Munchak, the Jawaan James bringing him in, but now we're going to talk about another Jawaan. Jawaan Taylor, I know you're kind of still a little bit early in the process here, but you gave me some names of the draft prospects that you wanted to give a little bit of an overview on, that you were a little bit more, at least feeling strong about your evaluation. And the first name that you gave me, Jawaan Taylor, currently my number 1 tackle on the board for the Denver Broncos. There are 3 guys that I kind of like, but I like Taylor's game. I like that he's kind of a tackle and guard, and I think he has some scheme versatility as well. But I'm curious about your thoughts on the right tackle from the University of Florida.
Yeah, so Jawaan Taylor, he's a lot of fun to watch. I watched 7 games of him, 6 from 2018 and 1 from 2017. He started out as a left tackle. He played left tackle last year. That's when I got to watch him at the earliest point of his career. I watched him against Florida State in 2017 at left, and he is not as good at left as he has at right, at least in that game. I mean, he looked like a completely different player. His stance is much different this year. He changed that pretty much completely, and he's just a different player on the right side. I'll probably get in another 2017 game for context, but to me, it was night and day. So I think he's a pure right tackle. He could maybe play guard. I haven't seen it, and I don't like his hand placement very much. So I think when you're thinking about a guy playing inside, if he can't get his hands on guys quickly and accurately, it could be a problem. He certainly has the physical dimensions to do it and the strength, but that's not a given to me. I right now I have him as a pure right tackle, which there's nothing wrong with that. I think he could be a very good one. But yeah, I think when you look at him as a player, his best traits, his size, his frame, length, play strength, power, athletic ability, mobility. He has everything you could want from a physical tool standpoint. That's for sure. I think he's elite in pretty much all those areas. Athletic ability, I think he's a very good athlete. I wouldn't say elite. But, yeah, those are really the strengths, I think, that stand out when you watch him on tape. I think his story is really interesting. I mean, he was close to 400 pounds at one point, so that's something to factor in. But granted, he showed up at the combine at 312, so that's very impressive. And, yeah, so it shows a good amount of dedication there on his part. It was cool. I mean, Florida, the entire offensive line was night and day from last year, really, playing under, Dan Mullen. And this year, the offensive line in Florida, the unit started 11 of 13 games together, which was the most for the Gators in over 10 years. So that's pretty cool that they were able to develop that chemistry together up front. And I think that you could see that in the way that Taylor played in a lot of ways. I think he's explosive. His initial explosiveness out of his stance and pass protection is very good. He can get to his spot. He has good range. his set points are inconsistent, I think, especially against wide dime rushers. But, his hand placement is the most concerning thing to me. I think he tends to wrap around guys a lot. He carries his hands very low, which I don't think is always a given to be a negative. If you carry your hands low and they end in the right place, who cares? But for him, I think he carries them low and they wind up late and wide a little too much for me. Didn't get called a lot at the college level, and he was able to just maul guys, and he's just bigger and stronger than a lot of people. But I think at the pro level, that can kind of rear its head a little bit more. So that was the most concerning thing to me. And then outside zone footwork, I don't think is great, but that's not a big deal. I think he could get better at that, and he's ready to go right now in a gap scheme for sure. So overall, he's a very good prospect in my mind. I don't think his floor is super high. I'd call it moderately high. He has a very high ceiling. So, he's a round one guy, I think. I wouldn't take him like top 10 or anything, but definitely somebody who you have to look at, I think, in that range. And yeah, he's a fun player to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And given the Jawaan James contract and what you said about him playing guard, maybe not the best with his hand usage and playing in that phone booth, probably not a guy that'll be super high on the Broncos board, but there's some traits there that they might find themselves intriguing. But moving on to another guy who might be a guy that projects better as a guard/tackle, Cody Ford from Oklahoma. And while some didn't think he had the best combine, solid player over that Oklahoma offensive line, maybe one of the best in college football last year. And some people have him going as high as 6 overall to the Giants. I've seen him projected to the Carolina Panthers. But I'm curious about your thoughts for him, maybe a potential right guard prospect for the Broncos, maybe at 10, but probably more likely if he's there in a trade down scenario.
Yeah, I really like Cody Ford. I put Taylor just a hair above Cody Ford, but I think they're like 1A, 1B in a sense. And I'm not done on tackles either, and I don't want to say that Jawaan is my first tackle either, because I don't think he's going to be, honestly. It's probably going to be Jonah Williams, but I'm not done on that one either yet. But anyway, Cody Ford, the reason why I have Taylor a little bit ahead of him, the biggest reason is because Taylor has 35 starts. Cody Ford has 21. That matters to me. Also, the competition, the level of competition for Jawaan Taylor was unmatched. It was far better than Cody Ford. He faced 3 potential first-round picks in Josh Allen, Brian Burns, and who else? Montez Sweat. So, yeah, his level of competition was phenomenal. So that you have to keep that in mind with the evaluation on Taylor. But for Ford, the guys that lined up across from him, he did very well the whole year, in my opinion. I think, again, for him, best trait, size, I think his athletic ability, power, and he's the best finisher in the draft, in my opinion. So that carries weight. He's absolutely the nastiest guy I've seen on tape. He's out for blood, basically. This guy, he's so much fun to watch. It's special. But yeah, I think he's an immediate starter at right tackle or guard. I know he got recruited to Oklahoma as a guard. He played in a couple games the last 2 years at guard. I think it was like 4 or 5, maybe. Well, he has 21 starts, and I think he had, 13 or 14 last year? So, 6, 7 starts at guard. So we never really got to see him at guard, but I think that's probably his best position, although I think he could play right tackle. So, yeah, but I thought he had good athletic ability. I won't say very good or elite, but I think he definitely has good athletic ability. I think he has light feet, good coordination, good short area quickness. Like I said, elite upper body strength. He really is able to toss guys around and dominate with his upper body strength. And I think his hands are incredibly heavy in a good way. He delivers massive force at the point of attack. So somebody like him, you get him in a predominantly gap power type of scheme with zone principles mixed in, and I think you have a good starter right away with potential to be very good. So, yeah, I'm a big Cody Ford fan, but you just have to consider level of competition and not a super experienced guy.
I just keep picturing the Broncos run game with a guy like him at right guard. You got Jawaan James there at right tackle. Then Leary left guard. You got some elite guys that can move people.
Yeah, he was used extensively as a puller as well. And I thought that he showed pretty good temperance as a puller. He's not looking to just go out there and kill people. He actually pulling, he showed a good amount of restraint from what I saw. So he's pretty tactful in that way. I know Munchak has loved to pull his guards, especially David DeCastro. So that could be something that is a little bit more appealing, just from that standpoint of the pulling aspect.
And talking about, kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, a left tackle, not a great run blocker yet, but elite movement skills. And I know you got to get out of here, Bannon, so we'll keep it short. But Andre Dillard, man, a lot of people have been talking about him as a massive riser, measured in, not elite length or anything like that, but just a different kind of mover in space. And the run game is going to need some work. Still a little bit of raw there coming from that air raid at Washington State. But, if the Broncos were done with Garrett Bowles, even before giving him a chance this year, I think Andre Dillard is one that I would be intrigued by at 10 overall just because the upside is huge, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think the upside is huge. The floor isn't very high, in my opinion. I think it could, because of the run game. Granted, I know it's a passing league, but he didn't pass set from a traditional passing sort of scheme that he'll be in the NFL because of that air raid, and the splits were huge. Saw a lot of 3-man fronts. That's concerning to me because with the split so wide, Mike Leach has said this himself. Part of the reason for that is to get the defensive ends further away from the quarterback. And that obviously makes it easier on the offensive tackles if the defensive end is further away. So that is a little bit concerning to me. And then the 3-man front thing, because Washington State doesn't really use a tight end. They're always in 4 wide for the most part. Defenses just can't afford to put four men on the line of scrimmage a lot, although he did see that a decent amount against teams like Stanford and even Cal, but still, for the most part, a lot of 3-man fronts. So he wasn't tested very much. His competition wasn't good for the most part. I like the end from Utah. He stood out to me, but generally, I just don't think he saw anybody very good. So that's a consideration. He has 39 straight starts, though, at left tackle, which you love to see. Elite athlete, and I'm not saying that because the combine, that factors not much at all into my evaluation. I think just purely on the film, he's an elite athlete, explosive and twitchy out of his stance and in space. And honestly, the 2 things that impressed me most about him was his ability to stay square to the line of scrimmage in his pass set. I thought he was better than probably anybody at doing that. Now, part of that has to do with the fact of his competition and the splits and things like that, but he had great discipline with his hips. Rarely ever gave a soft inside shoulder to a rusher, so really played inside out at a high level. And I thought his hand usage was very good. So that's very encouraging because you could be a great athlete. That's not going to block anybody, especially in pass protection. So the fact that he's able to use his hands as well as he did was very, very encouraging to me. So I think I'll probably have him a little behind those other 2 guys, but still somebody that in terms of value, end of first, early second. Now, because of his upside being as high as it is, I could easily see him going, the first tackle off the board. But just for me, I don't know. There's too many questions for that value, but definitely somebody who I really like as a prospect.
Yeah, I totally get that. And again, if the Broncos didn't have Bowles, I think you got to give him 1 more year probably. But if they didn't, Andre Dillard's one I could probably get behind. But speaking at 10 offensive line, the Broncos got the left tackle figured out right now. Garrett Bowles doesn't play anywhere else. You got Jawaan James, right tackle, probably not playing anywhere else. But a guy I could talk myself into at 10 overall if he's there, Jonah Williams. Now, there's the debate. Is he a guard? Is he a tackle? Is he a center? You know what? For me, he's an offensive lineman. I could see him at any spot, and I think he's going to be successful. There's multiple ways that he can win, and I'm curious about your thoughts here. I feel like you've been pretty adamant that he is a tackle, but I think his versatility is something. Look at Billy Turner, what he just got paid. Versatility is very valued in today's game, and having a guy that can offer some flexibility there and even some insurance in case Garrett Bowles, if he's sayonara after the end of the year, I have no problem moving Jonah Williams over to left tackle. Curious about your thoughts on him. I know you said you were almost finishing up earlier this morning. I'm not sure if you're there yet.
Yeah, I'm not quite there yet, but I pretty much have my thoughts established on him. Jonah Williams, I agree with what you said. He's really an offensive lineman. I mean, I am adamant about the fact that I think you should let him prove to you that he can't play left tackle before you move him. I absolutely think he's earned that right based on his film and his production. So, yeah, I see him as a left tackle, but I also see him being successful at any position, especially guard. The center talk, I just don't know why you would put him at center. I mean, I don't know. That's just a little bit extreme to me. Not that I don't think he'll be good there, but I say you definitely try him at guard, which I think he could be good. So I think, with Jonah Williams, he has the highest floor out of any of these guys. He's the safest guy, I think, and that's because his technique is better than anybody. I think his hand usage is elite, and that's really the thing that stands out to me. Not that he's perfect with his hands. There is a couple little things that I'm going to notate in the scouting report, but for the most part, I think his hand usage is definitely elite. I think he's as good of a run blocker as a pass blocker, to be honest. That was something that I wasn't totally aware of watching him in the amount that I did before I really got into the film. Is he's a very good run blocker. Yeah. And especially in gap type of concepts, but Alabama is very multiple. So you got to see him do everything. He pulled to the right, pulled to the left, cut off guys in zone, reached guys in zone, climbed to the second level, and did a lot of gap stuff where he's, deuce blocking with the left guard and actually generating movement off the ball. So I think he plays a really good pad level. He's very, very smart in a lot of different ways in terms of the specific area is on double teams, keeping his eyes on the linebacker and knowing when to overtake or release at the perfect time. Just his timing and things and technique on double teams is outstanding, I thought. So, yeah, I think you're getting a very well-rounded player. He has a very good anchor in pass protection as well. So his ceiling, I don't think is as high as maybe a couple of those guys, but I think it still is relatively high. I mean, I think he could be a very good starter in the league. I don't ever see him being, he's not going to ever be Tyron Smith or Trent Williams or anything because he's just not that guy physically. And I don't necessarily think he has elite range or anything as a pass protector, but I do think he has good range to block guys, like wide nine, speed rusher type guys. He's going to have to clean some things up though. And I'm going to go into that pretty detailed in the reports, but overall, I mean, I really like who he is, his makeup, everything about what he's been exposed to, his experience, and then just his skill level, I think is very high. So, yeah, I mean, to me, I think he's the best offensive lineman that I've seen so far, just in terms of right now. So, yeah, I'm a big Jonah Williams fan for sure.
Is there anything to be said of, it's a low-hanging fruit, but the Zach Martin comparison, if he has moved to guard?
Maybe a little bit. I think there's a little bit of validity to that. I watched Zach Martin a little bit at Notre Dame, and to me, he was a little bit better. I just didn't see him get beat really ever. Now, I didn't sit here and study 7 games of Zach Martin coming out of college like I just did for Jonah Williams. So, I'm sure he probably got beat sometime, but I remember when he came out, it was like, man, this guy, he was just a little bit more, he was just kind of flawless in a lot of people's eyes and from what I saw. So, but at the same time, I didn't study Zach Martin coming out of Notre Dame. So I'm not too sure, but just in terms of being technically refined and being strong, I think, the thing about Jonah Williams playing guard, to me, why it would work is his anchor is very good, which is important. His hands are phenomenal. And if I'm thinking of a tackle that's going to move into guard, your hands have to be really good. Your anchor has to be really good. You have to be a very good run blocker. Those are things Jonah Williams is. So, yeah, it doesn't really matter where you play him. Like I said, I just would start him at left, but yeah, I just want him on my team. He's one of those guys.
Man, I'm not sure the Broncos do it 10th overall, but if they go with Jonah Williams there, I'm not going to be upset. Now, some other guys, I know you got to get out of here, but just a quick touch on 4 other guys that some people have round 1, top 40 kind of grades. Garrett Bradbury, from North Carolina State, center, really good athlete. Eric McCoy had a solid combine besides the 3-cone, but some good tape, especially against good competition. I mean, not only was it an SEC schedule, but he also went up against Clemson. So talk about going up against the elite of the elite. Dalton Risner, who's a guy that many Bronco fans are pining for because Risner's from small town Colorado, and he went up to chase John Elway down at the Senior Bowl to introduce himself, etc. And Chris Lindstrom from Boston College. Any of these guys that stand out to you that you want to touch on at all before you get out of here?
So I haven't watched Lindstrom yet. I've watched some of Risner, and I like his tape. I think he has a little bit of a false step in his pass set, and I know his PFF grade's great and all that stuff I've heard and whatever, but I just think at the NFL level, if you're talking about wide 9 speed rushers flying off the edge with an inside counter, that is something that could creep up on him. But that's really the only thing that I saw on film that I had a question about that I think kind of gave me some pause of him playing right tackle.
What about guard or center?
I definitely think he could play guard, and I may wind up liking him there more, honestly. That's kind of the way I'm leaning based on what I've seen so far. But I think he's a guy who has a lot of position flexibility. So, yeah, that's definitely valuable. But I don't see him as just like no-brainer tackle, at least not right now. And as far as Bradbury, now I think he's special. So, I mean, Bradbury to me, I mean, if Ryan Kelly from Alabama went as high as he did, which I think he definitely went top 20 from what I think
he went like 20. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's Bradbury. I'm not saying they're the same player at all, but I think he can be as good for sure. Especially if you are talking about the teams that run a lot of zone. Like if you put him in LA, oh my goodness. I mean,
unfair.
It would be insane to watch him and run an outside zone as much as LA does. Or even San Francisco. I know they have Richburg, but
Minnesota will run to the podium if he's there.
Yeah, I mean, those two teams and then a couple of others that are predominantly zone-based, I mean, wow, he could be definitely Pro Bowl material. So, yeah, I did a podcast with his offensive line coach the other day. And, I mean, just to hear the sort of preparation that he was going through. I mean, after his junior year, he basically started preparing like a pro then, going to bed early at night, studying film, his diet, the way he took care of his body was all at a pro level after his junior year. So he's a guy who takes everything very seriously. He's a professional. He has that professional type of mindset already. So that's huge in terms of this whole thing we're doing as evaluators is trying to evaluate human beings. When you know that a guy is wired that way, I mean, that's hard for us to gauge on the media side, but to hear it from his coach, to hear it from other people, and then to see the season that he had, it wasn't a mistake that he was the best center in the country, I think. Not only, I mean, he's talented and you can't teach that, but he definitely has that preparation side down, and I think that's very important. So, man, I mean, yeah, it's easy to love Bradbury. I mean, the only thing that pops up is like physical dimension wise, I think his arm length was like 31 something. Yeah. Which, that's like literally the only thing I could think of because his anchor is pretty strong. It's not like he's a zone only guy who is going to get tossed around in gap schemes. I think he could probably get even a little bit more functionally strong, but yeah, I think I don't think he's scheme dependent. I think he clearly has a better fit in his own scheme, but I don't see him as a guy who's going to be a liability in gap concept. So, yeah, he's maybe one of the cleanest guys in the draft, in my opinion. And then who was the other guy that you mentioned?
Eric McCoy from Texas A&M, who I believe worked underneath Duke Manyweather.
Yeah, he did, and I got to meet him at the Combine, which was cool. Really nice kid, but I honestly haven't dug into his tape yet. So I've just seen clips of him basically, and seeing the way he moves in space and stuff like that, it looks pretty impressive. But yeah, I haven't gotten to him yet, but he's definitely somebody I'm going to watch.
Awesome. Well, that was Brandon Thorn. Brandon, let the listeners know where they can find you and drop any information. I know you got a guide coming out here.
Yeah, so at Brandon Thorn NFL on Twitter, and I'm going to be doing, I don't know yet if I'm going to be doing a top 5 at each position on the offensive line or just a top 10 overall, but it's not going to be super extensive in terms of just the sheer number of reports, but I'm going to be very in depth with each guy. I'm going to watch at least 7 games of each guy. I mean, pretty much any tape that I can get my hands on, I'm going to watch of the player. So I'll have a lot of exposure to these guys, and I'm going to be writing pro-style scouting reports, basically, and then hopefully incorporate a little bit more in there as well. But, yeah, so look for probably 10 to 15 reports, and, yeah, that'll probably come out in the next couple weeks, I think.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time. Like always, we run a little bit long, but I just couldn't stop you. You were spouting so much good information. I just needed to soak it all up. So we appreciate you for coming on, and I'll make sure to tag you when this is out.
All right, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, that was Brandon Thorn. And as always, man, just great tidbits on the offensive line. I mean, talking from the footwork to the base to the hand usage. I mean, we could have talked for much longer, but unfortunately he is a busy guy, and I know he's a little bit more available in the afternoons. So I was curious if you had any takeaways from the interview there, Carl.
I want Cody Ford.
Oh man, you want Cody Ford? Okay. See, it made me want Jonah Williams and Garrett Bradbury.
Is that what it was? Okay. Well, when he's talking about the heavy hands and just this guy wanting to finish people, I've always been one that wants that attitude on that offensive line.
Yeah.
Walks in and just says, I own you, and just take the soul of a person. I mean, we talked about that last year with last year's draft, and what's his name? Quentin Nelson.
Okay. I was thinking tackle.
Quentin Nelson. And I mean, that's what he does, and he has no problem going in front of people saying, that's what I'm going to do to you. And I was sitting there saying, I mean, I know we talked about position value last year and all that kind of stuff, but just to have that kind of attitude, it just really spreads through the rest of the offensive line of this is who we are.
Yeah.
And so to have that at the right guard position, plus to have that tackle versatility, because Jawaan James, he's played some left tackle. He could maybe move over, say Garrett Bowles doesn't work out, and you still have 2 strong tackles that you can work with. So I just like that versatility that he brings to the table. But I also like that with Jonah Williams too. I mean, he's another guy. He's just a lot more clean on what you see on tape. I almost felt like this last year he got a little too bored.
Yeah.
I thought he got a little more sloppy his last season than compared to earlier years. And I don't know if that's just, I know I'm getting drafted this year. Sometimes going against that lower competition, I actually noticed it more in the lower competition games than the higher competition games. The Clemson game wasn't his best one. That was high competition, but beyond that one,
the length, man. That's my biggest concern with Jonah Williams. Is that he was getting irritated about listing some of those guys that have shorter length that have succeeded at tackle, but I just do not see the movement skills or overwhelming athleticism that those other guys can get away with the lack of length. When I watch Jonah Williams. Now, he's a great technician. I think he's going to be fine there. But at left tackle, man, I don't think it's great upside there. But when you add in his positional versatility, you're going to get a solid player, maybe an elite player, I think, if you put him at guard, maybe right tackle as well. And he can play left tackle, which is, I mean, the fact that we can even talk about him at left tackle, I think is big for me. But, yeah, I agree. I'm a little bit – I trust Brandon's opinion more than my own. I am a little bit disheartened to hear that he doesn't think Taylor is a guard candidate because of the hand usage, which makes sense. I see a guy who can move well to the second level and can pin guys and drive guys, which I associate with guard play, but that hand usage is key. That's one reason Garrett Bowles does not make sense at guard at all. I hear some people talk about him moving him inside, and I can't imagine that because his hand usage in the phone booth, you have to be so much more technical, and that's just not Garrett Bowles' game.
Right.
So, yeah, let me pin it one more way for you. Okay, so you're at 10 overall. Are there any of these guys ones that you want to take?
Honestly, right now, I'd probably go Cody Ford.
Cody Ford at 10 overall.
I mean, I love his tape, and I love that versatility that he can play either guard spot or play right tackle. I don't think he has that left tackle versatility.
No, I don't think he has the athleticism.
But I just think of, again, when the Broncos are going to have a run-first mentality, I mean, that's the strength of this team. When you look at the running back position and what we have there, you look at some of the offensive linemen that we have, they're known as run blockers. And so then you add in another guy that's just going to add to that. I just think makes us one of the best running teams. Plus, then you got our defense. I mean, you look at how they're shaping up. you want to have that run offense that really keeps the defense fresh and it wins the position battle, all those kind of things. And so I guess at 10, I mean, I don't really like any of these guys at 10. I think you're going to find, I mean, just look at this group of set of players here. There's going to be some players from this list that make it to our second round pick, I think, or at least get pretty darn close. I mean, I think at least one of these guys is going to fall there. And I guess that's where I see the sweet spot for the offensive line, that second and third round for the Broncos. But, I mean, for me right now, if I had to pick from this litter, I guess I would go Cody Ford. What about you?
For me, it'd have to be Jonah Williams, just because I think he is more scheme versatile than Cody Ford. I mean, in a gap scheme, I think Cody Ford, if you're running a for sure gap scheme, Cody Ford, but with Scangarella coming over in the comments from Munchak, I feel like it's going to be a multiple scheme, more of like a zone power kind of scheme rather than a straight up gap scheme. And I think Jonah Williams' hand usage and foot usage and versatility is something that, and just, the tape that he's put out there multiple years against high-level competition, I think that getting him is for sure something that I would look at 10. I don't think he's not a tier 1 or tier 2 player for me in this class for the Broncos at 10. But if all the other options are out there and they're set on building this offensive line, I think Jonah Williams offers you the most versatility and floor and upside altogether, and offers you a plan beyond Garrett Bowles if, let's say, things really just don't work out for him. Right. So I think – go ahead.
NFL ready.
Say that again, sorry.
And he's definitely the most NFL ready by far. If you're looking,
maybe in Bradbury.
I guess you could
move in position.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say that. But just, I mean, this guy has been dominant since day one. He's pretty darn technical most of the time. Like I said, he just gets lazy sometimes, it almost seems like. And I think it's just almost, maybe not lazy, bored. That's maybe a better word. Because when he is on, it is hard to get by that guy.
Yeah. And
I mean, he gets to the spot so quickly compared to the other guys that are trying to beat him. And I love his mind for football. And maybe that's Cody Ford's more athlete than technical guy.
Yeah.
When you're looking at, he talked about, what has he had, 21 starts? And so I look at the ceiling of what that guy can bring to the Broncos. I guess that's why I have him a little bit higher. I like stealing guys. I like adding that little bit extra potential. I'm willing to take a guy that maybe isn't as NFL ready, but offers that higher ceiling.
I hear you. I personally think, though, I'm going to lean with Jonah Williams there just because of if you're taking a guy top 10, he needs to have some upside in that regard. And I just don't see it as much. I feel like a little bit more limited scheme-wise with Cody Ford. But that's just me. Now, if the Broncos trade down, though, let's say they trade down 15 to 25 range, how does this change?
Then I'm honestly looking pretty hard at offensive line for the Broncos.
Yeah.
I mean, again, that's where I see a lot of these guys going, is in that 15 to 25 range. I think you're going to see a lot of teams that have an offensive line. Every team has an offensive line need.
Yeah.
It go wrong taking a lot of these guys when you're there. There's some that I'd feel like were a pretty big reach. I think Risner maybe is a little bit of reach there. McCoy's a little bit of reach there. But the rest of them, I think you'd feel pretty good about what you're doing. I don't know if I would take Dillard, just because he seems to be very limited to the left tackle spot. And yeah. I would just wonder, okay, what are we doing with Bowles? I feel like you're replacing
one. If that's the case.
Right. Well, then you're probably looking to trade him if you can.
Yeah.
But I feel like you haven't really, I don't know if you've really improved the team with that pick. Maybe down the road, 2-3 years from now. But the rest of these guys I could see coming in because you can find a spot for them. Again, you're having to trade Dillard for Bowles, and I think that they have a lot of similar issues coming in of both being very raw, both having high athleticism, but just kind of wondering how are they going to do year one. I don't know if Dillard's going to do great year one because I think he has a lot more to learn than some of these other guys. And so again, for me, a lot of these other guys are better choices because they have that position versatility. I'm with you a little bit. I think Jawaan Taylor with a little bit of coaching could really play that guard spot for us and then move out the tackle if you needed him to. And then Cody Ford, of course, he has range of positions that he can play for you. Jonah Williams. Then, of course, you got Bradbury, who, we need a center. He makes a ton of sense. You're getting a guy that I think could come in day one and be a top 5 center in the NFL.
Yeah.
So, even there, he might not have the versatility, but he fits a position of need and fits the huge talent guy that is going to be good day one. Yeah,
I don't disagree with you. I think that for me, if you're sitting at 10 overall, Dillard makes sense in a vacuum, but with Bulls there, I don't agree with that. And obviously he's not playing guard. Jawaan Taylor, probably limited to right tackle. Probably not him. Cody Ford, maybe. I don't think he's got the fluidity that I want for the zone scheme personally. And also he doesn't have that left tackle upside or center upside. So for me, it's Jonah Williams at 10 if they have to. If not, I'm looking to trade down and hopefully landing either a Garrett Bradbury pick 15 to 20 or Chris Lindstrom, which would be even later round one for me. I think 25 onward. There's just other players I like, but overall, pretty good draft class of the offensive line up at the top. We'll dive in a little bit deeper, hopefully when we get closer to the draft, but yeah, I like it. I feel like Munchak is going to have a big say, and I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think day 2 is the sweet spot for the Broncos for the offensive line.
I'm with you. And I think he's going to have his guy that he's pounding the table for, and Elway's going to say, let's get him.
Yeah, for sure. And I also want to give a shout out day 2 guy that a friend of mine, Cole Deal, has brought to my attention, Phil Haynes from Wake Forest. So got to watch out for him. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Nick Kendell MHH. Also, make sure you follow Brandon Thorn on Twitter at Brandon Thorn NFL. And check out his podcast, Trench Warfare, to get your weekly fill of talking the big uglies. Make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports Digital, to find more content covering the Denver Broncos. Head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and comment. Your support can help us continue to bring you our Denver Bronco deep dives. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl and Brandon, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of Building the Broncos. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you soon. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.